Okay.
Let's see.
I'm sending my messages while you do that.
I'm going to turn off my phone. I got this new phone a few weeks ago and I'm still don't know how to use it. Okay.
I fully understand.
Okay. We are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our live stream for April 16th, 2019. I am your host this week, Dana Morningstar, and with me is the lovely and talented Angie Atkinson. So hello. Angie.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Always happy to be here. Yes.
Good deal. Well, while people are coming on, let's share with them what we were talking about before we went live. You guys, just real quick, we were discussing about the relationship between narcissism and different zodiac signs. This is a question that Angie and I both get quite frequently. So we thought it was worth discussing. So Angie, let them know about your study and what you came up with.
Okay, so I did a study last year, I think it was, last year, where I basically did a survey of the people in our community and people in the narcissistic abuse recovery community. And I asked people what sign their toxic person was, their narcissist, and what sex they were, and also what sign that the person was. So what I found interesting is that there was a slight. We had 1,268 people vote, okay, and do the survey. And of those, the Scorpios led and the Pisces was at the bottom. And I won't go into all the numbers unless Dana wants me to do that. But the numbers were still, they were very, I wouldn't say that there was necessarily a huge, correlation between astrological sign and narcissism. I think it's about nurture and sometimes nature. My cat's over here causing trouble. I'm sorry.
Oh, kidding. So just out of curiosity, so tell us, okay, so the number one response was Scorpio. Yes. For partners that were abusive. So the abusive partners were Scorpios.
Yes.
What was the number of Scorpios?
188 total, 60 of those being female and 128 of them being male.
Interesting. Okay. And what was the least?
The least was the Pisces, which had 105 total and 71 male and 34 female.
Interesting. Yeah. That's interesting.
It's very interesting. And, there were certain, I guess certain personalities, may or may not fall into those categories, right? But the thing is that I think astrology is potentially flawed and subjective in some ways. And if you look at, I don't know, do you remember a couple years ago when they were talking about our signs have been wrong all this time and the planet has tilted or something, and now we all have different astrological signs?
We're all bumped down a sign or something.
Right.
Yes, I remember reading about that. Yeah.
Right. And that would, so I think that would skew these results. On its own, that in itself, because maybe people are going with the old signs, maybe people are going with the new signs, but officially I don't think anything has changed, and I think people still consider themselves whatever they are. So there's that factor. And of course there's the factor of this was 1,268 people, which could have been, they were probably mostly people from our community. So these people, so we're looking at a couple of different factors that could affect these results. You know what I mean? But ultimately, astrology is fun and I like to look at my horoscope sometimes, but I certainly don't live my life by it. Do you?
No. I used to, when I was a teenager, I was really into astrology. And here JJ is saying in the chat that she used to do charts but has come to the conclusion that it's all man-made. And I would agree. I think it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't give it a lot of weight. And the reason I think it's important to bring this up is one of the things that Angie and I see a lot is, well, with anybody that's struggling to try to figure something out, they're going to continue to kind of fumble around. And this is what we all do when we're learning anything. And we're trying to figure out, well, could this be the cause? Could this be the cause? Is it, is it this? Is it that? And the challenge with this is it's very easy to link up incorrect cause and effect. So to find things that are correlated, but not causative.
Right.
So, so the result of this tends to be where people are like, oh gosh, you know what? I dated one Scorpio, for example, or one Aries, and they were trouble. And but then maybe they think, okay, well, men, what caused me pain is basically the question they're asking. Maybe it's older men that are Scorpios that are also, they have their own business. And a lot of this stuff happens unconsciously. Like we're not even aware that we're making these connections. Right. And what's scary about this is then they can be reinforced. So let's say, for example, you're listening to the live stream and you're like, yeah, there's no truth in that. It's not narcissism. Doesn't matter about zodiac sign or gender or profession. It's just a behavior, right? A problematic behavior that's just out there. And then the next person they date is a male, has their own company and is a Scorpio. And then they're like, well, you know what? My subjective experience tells me that out of, the last 2 relationships I've had, these have been the factors in common. So therefore there must be truth to this.
Right.
And
I'll tell you something interesting. Coincidentally, I'm sure my ex-husband was an Aquarius, which was the number 2 on the list. However, my daughter, she's a Scorpio and she's not a narcissist. You know what I mean? So I think it's interesting. I mean, my point is we could easily, like you're saying, we could easily kind of take our own situations and squish them in and kind of make stuff work. Right. Yeah. But I was surprised to see Virgo on the top half of the list, actually, because it's like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 5th one, from the top. And every Virgo I've ever met has been, and here we are talking just like that. Every Virgo I've ever met has been this. And that's not really true either, is it? Because it doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah. I enjoy the concept of astrology. When I was younger too, I was very into it. And I wanted, I think, to be, I'm a Pisces and I wanted to be all Pisces all the time. And certainly I do sort of resemble some of those traits, but I don't resemble other traits, that the Pisces does. So yeah, I think you're spot on with your assessment.
Yeah. And if there is some truth, because I'm a Leo and fire signs, especially Leos, tend to be notoriously narcissistic.
Right.
And
always want the center of attention.
Right. And, so my guess would be is if there are certain signs that do tend to kind of be more narcissistic than others, it's because they're leaning more into that. There really is kind of this identity foreclosure that happens with people where we read, especially when we're younger, we read, oh, well, this is what you are according to your sign, that we kind of steer into that, or we justify our bad behavior thinking like, well, I can't help it. I'm just a Leo.
Right?
And, but then we get older and we kind of realize, well, it doesn't matter. So,
yeah. And really in the grand scheme of things, I mean, you can't go into a job, let's say, and be like, well, I'm a Leo, so, I'll be good at this. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's irrelevant. But also I don't think, I obviously being a Leo, but ironically though, Leos were not at the top of that list.
Yeah.
They were close.
That's interesting.
Yeah. They were 4th from the bottom, so that they had 131 as opposed to the Scorpio's 188. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
But it is interesting. You're right. Because, and see, this goes back to what's narcissism. We're talking about toxic narcissism here. We're not talking about, wanting to be or enjoying to be, the center of attention or wanting attention. That doesn't necessarily make you a toxic narcissist. Everybody wants a little bit of attention. You know what I mean? Whether they want it, in public or not, you know what I mean? Or from strangers or not is irrelevant. It all, to me, comes back to that lack of empathy, and I think that could be exhibited by any sign if they had the right sort of damage.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, so I think at the end of the day, it's just so important that we realize, narcissism, it's a behavior trait. We all have it. It's a human trait. It's just the degree and frequency is to where it becomes a problem. So, right. There is this concept called healthy narcissism, which is where we have a healthy degree of self-orientation, I guess you could say, to where we're like, yeah, you know what? Why not me? Why not now? I'm going to set goals and I'm going to go out and try to achieve them. And it's, yeah, it's a
It's
healthy,
healthy.
it's not to the destruction or the negative impact to other people. So when a lot of survivors talk about, oh my gosh, I'm so scared that I've now become a narcissist because and really what I think they're saying more often than not is they're so terrified of being hurt that they become kind of they develop this prickly exterior where it's sort of like, just stay away from me. And they're very reactive because of the trauma. And they notice that there are these negative personality changes within themselves, and that's terrifying. And I don't know about you, Angie, but I know I can completely relate to that. And it took a while to find my equilibrium with all of that. Did you experience that since your situation was longer lasting and family related?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah.
Well, you also had an ex-husband. So you've had two significant relationships with narcissists.
Yeah. And I guess, yeah, I don't know if I think I definitely had some of those experiences. Yeah, sorry. I feel like I didn't fully hear what you were saying because I got distracted by something in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Actually, let me address this
Yes.
live stream donation real quick, and then I'll repeat the question. This is from Will. Thank you, Will. He says it's the environment conditional experience.
For sure.
Not narcissism. Yeah. Well, that's okay. What we're talking, the trauma. Oh, for so many of us, kind of developing that prickly exterior where we're very hyper focused on ourselves and our own pain, and we become very reactive and we lash out at other people, and we're like, oh my gosh, I have become the abuser.
Yeah.
Is narcissism contagious? What happened to me? And
I definitely had some of that when I got into my marriage. Like in fact, any of the relationships I had from, young adulthood until after I started to really heal, I experienced that up to a point where I thought things should be different than they were. And I was certainly, I used to tell myself that it was about me being anti-societal rules and societal guidelines, and I could be who I wanted to be. I used to joke that I was the man in relationships to my friends, meaning that I was tough and I didn't get too close and I didn't let anybody and so I really I did act like that. I felt that way, and I did that. I was too afraid to reactively abuse anyone else in my life. The originals, the original people. But certainly by the time I was married to my ex-husband, I had certain qualities, fleas, whatever you want to call it. I got past those because he was so different than what I grew up with. He was so, I thought the polar opposite, but wasn't, so I had to try to straighten out my own behavior, and I did that. And then I realized how toxic he was. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I totally get that. Yeah. And I think it's difficult to even say, I think, because, like, for example, this is a dumb example, but it's really what happened. When I moved in with my ex-husband, I couldn't believe that he thought he was going to have say-so in the way we decorated our place that we lived in. Like, I was so shocked that he thought he was going to help pick things and choose things to be decoration in the house. Like, what are you talking about? That's not how it works. The woman does all of that and chooses all that, and you just put it up for her,
Right.
And that was not the case. And so that was my first hard slap in the face, I think. But luckily I smoothed out a lot of those rough edges over the years.
Well, and you bring up a good point. So there's different types of kind of narcissism or kind of self-absorption, and it comes from different reasons. I was listening, the book we're discussing for our book club this month is called The Anger Trap. And in it, he's talking about kind of, I don't know, kind of why people get angry. And so one of the points I was thinking about with the book is, well, it's not always just kind of this one thing. Sometimes there's multiple factors. And kind of like with what you're describing, there is kind of this kind of cultural or sometimes social, I guess socially induced like narcissism, where there's this idea of, because I felt the same way when I was married to my first husband. It was very much understand, like if mama ain't happy, then nobody's happy.
Right.
And kind of a thing. Right. Right. And there's a lot of toxic programming that women are given, and we don't think about it. And men have their own stuff too. So I'm not letting anybody off the hook, but like, it's sort of like, okay, well, you're a queen. You deserve to kind of be on this pedestal. It's, this is your house. There's, and then we kind of get down the road far enough and we're like, gosh, you know what? Where did I get this from? Like this,
right.
This isn't very nice or very fair. And
right. And I think that's what, for me, it was like recognizing that, okay, if I wanted to be the queen, I could, but then I had to make him the king if he was the husband. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about a narcissist, I'm talking about the current husband. But, you have to treat in a healthy relationship, you would treat your partner as, with the same level of respect as you would treat yourself. And if you treat yourself with no respect, then you're not ready to be in a relationship, Yeah. That's what I learned the hard way.
Yeah. There's just that two-way street there, right? It's all about kind of dignity and respect for both people. And things really get out of balance if it's just kind of this one-way street.
Right. And I want to add one more thing really quickly, and then we can move on. But as opposed, when we're talking about a healthier relationship, we're talking about sometimes I think, you have to recognize that you'll end up giving 80% and your partner might only give 20, but then other times you might give 40 and they might give 60, but it has to kind of balance out. So it depends on what's happening in life and what the circumstances are. I guess my point is, in a healthy relationship, sometimes you take care of them and sometimes they take care of you, but you always take care of each other, kind of, in a way. You know what I mean? Yeah. You work things out.
But I also add to that, I think dignity and respect are always present.
100%.
Because the kind of that give and take, absolutely. But I think where so many of us kind of get tangled up is we're misconstruing the highs and lows of a normal or of an abusive relationship as something that could be normal. Like, well, but they aren't perfect all the time, right? Like they did, like in this book that we're reading, oh my gosh, there's a part in it where it talks about, well, this guy's father wasn't that bad. He wasn't bad because even though he was verbally abusive and held the whole house hostage emotionally on a regular basis, he still went to his son's baseball games and taught him how to work on cars. And it was like that right there, because there is such this difference, because people aren't all there. It's not so polarizing. It's not so cut and dry that they're all bad or that they're all good. There's kind of these mix, and yeah.
And it's an important point, I think.
Yeah. Let's see. Do you have any questions from the chat? I'm still going through it. So I don't have any.
Yeah, let me see. Well, okay. I want to address something, and if you, I think we haven't addressed it yet, but if we have, please stop me. Dandelion Green said, I only just jumped on and may have missed something, but I'm a Scorpio. These conversations relating to astrological signs and narcissism are extremely upsetting to me. And I just want to say really quickly that Dana and I both agree that there's no correlation. So it's really, that's not
causation. Like,
right.
You might meet 10 Scorpios or 10 Leos and they're all awful, but it's
right. The 11th one has a 50-50 chance of being decent,
Right. Yeah.
So, and yeah. So,
and along the same lines, this is something you probably get too, Angie, is a lot of people. And again, when people are trying to kind of figure out causative factors, what caused this, or what even goes with this, some other kind of, kind of off the track comments that get made or questions that get asked, or people will say, well, does anybody else's, does the narcissist in their life or the abuser in their life, did they have trouble with insomnia? Or did they have erectile dysfunction? Or did they have diabetes? Or did they have, XYZ? Were they an only child? Was it this? Was it that? And there's all kinds of factors out there, but at the end of the day, it's a personality trait, and all of our personalities are shaped in a wide variety of ways. So, because again, it's the logic. People were doing this with my red flag series, and this caused me so much freaking anxiety for like years. Where if I did a video on, I don't know, let's say I would say, okay, one of the red flags, they're impulsive. Mm-hmm. Right. And then I was getting all these emails and messages from people that are like, oh my gosh, I'm impulsive. Does this mean I'm a narcissist?
Oh, yes. Right? I get that too.
Yes. Yes. And so what the thinking, why that's tangled up is it's sort of like saying all cats are mammals, therefore all mammals are cats.
Right.
And it's not the same thing. So just because maybe narcissists might be impulsive doesn't mean that all people that are impulsive are necessarily narcissists.
Exactly. Yeah. I did a series called Things Narcissists Say When, and like when they're gaslighting, when they're doing this, when they're doing that. And I got the same thing. In fact, I just saw a comment about that today from a guy. Well, I said some of those things when I was leaving my wife. So does that mean I'm the narcissist, right?
Yeah.
All narcissists are not people who say this up. I freezed up.
No, but you're back. You're back.
Okay. Good. I don't know what you missed or what I said, but
you were saying the guy in the chat had said, well, I was that way with my wife.
Oh yeah. So a guy in the comments, he said, so I must be a narcissist. And, just like you said, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, and I think you're right. People do get really upset about that stuff. And it's just this, and I'm doing one right now. I'm working on a video for publication that will be the differences between the HSP, the highly sensitive people, and the covert narcissist, because they're confused quite often. And what it comes down to, I think, is the reasons behind the behaviors, and of course the lack of empathy, which I always throw in there because to me that's the core of it. But
it is. Yeah, it really is. And this kind of stuff gets confused. I've had comments on my YouTube channel where the same, I had made a comment about kind of these delusions of grandeur, that they might say that they have, they were in the military, or that they are this highly successful entrepreneur, or, some kind of they overstate their academic credentials, these kinds of things. And then I had some guy who was like, well, I guess then I must be a narcissist because, I served in the army and this, that, and the other. And it was like, yeah. Come on, dude. Like, wasn't saying that every person that served in the military is a narcissist. Like
right.
Yikes. So yeah.
People don't think.
it's frustrating. And then it's anxiety inducing, because then you're like, oh my gosh, people are really misunderstanding this. And I don't want people to think that they're this horrible person when this is just a video and it's not pertaining to them. And
well, I guess, yeah. And I guess the bottom line is, hello, ladies. Hello, James, Angela. Okay. James is not a lady, but anyway, the Angela was saying, hello, my beautiful girls. So I noticed that in the chat. Anyway, no, but I guess what I think the bottom line is, the thing that we need to state here to this community that we're talking with right now is that it's normal to feel like, oh my gosh, is it me? Am I the narcissist? That's very normal, especially when you have been in a situation like this. And so I guess my point would be to anytime you ask yourself, is it me? Am I the narcissist? Ask yourself, do you care how other people feel? And do you care, does your behavior reflect that? And if you can honestly say, yes, I care how other people feel and I treat them accordingly, you're not the narcissist. I just want to make that clear. Okay. Moving right along. Anyway. Oh,
Here's a question from Dana, who says, what are some good pointers to help with self-validation since a lot of us have been so invalidated? It's
Ooh.
hard to move forward thinking all of your thoughts and feelings are wrong.
Yes. Well, may
Go
I?
for it. Yeah.
Okay. The first point I would just reiterate what I just said, which is to ask yourself if you care how other people feel and if you act accordingly. You behave like you care how other people feel, because that's number one, to know that you're a decent person. The next thing you have to do is recognize that a lot of those negative voices in your head or negative thoughts that you have didn't really come from you initially. They were kind of planted there by someone who was being toxic to you in your life. And so if you can, an exercise that I like to give my clients is this: write down, as many as you want, say 10 negative self-beliefs that you have. Okay. Let's say I'm gonna say three. Like, let's say you think you're ugly, you think you're stupid, and you think your nose is too big. Okay. So I'm just pulling things out because these are things that we all probably have felt one way or another about. So if you think you're ugly, write that down, and then ask yourself, who told me I was ugly? Who made me feel ugly in my life? Okay. And then I want you to think about that. And then I want you to cross out I am ugly. And I want you to write next to it, I'm beautiful, or I'm handsome, or I'm gorgeous. And then the same thing down the list. You think you're stupid. Think about who told you that. And then I want you to cross it out on the paper. I'm stupid. Cross that out and write, I am highly intelligent, or I'm, really talented, or whatever, any positive replacement for that negative belief. And the same down the list. So if you think your nose is too big, cross that out. Imagine who made you think that your nose was too big in the first place, or who, teased you about it or whatever. And while you're doing that, cross it out and then write, my nose is gorgeous and unique, whatever. You know what I'm saying? I can smell a lot of stuff, whatever it is. And don't let yourself feel, it starts with a change in perspective. Am I frozen, or can you hear me? Okay. Okay. It starts with a change in perspective and it goes from there. So that's what I would start with. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, you were muted. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I just thought, I'm like, I've been clicking around here. I hope I muted myself, but yeah, you're good.
Okay. Yeah. So it's about changing your perception and choosing to believe what do you think, Dana?
Yeah, I think that's a really great start. I would also, like Angie's saying, basically like getting some different references. Mm-hmm. So as far as validation goes, a lot of people struggle with kind of trusting their judgment and kind of being able to trusting their perceptions, I should say, of a situation or of people. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the big steps in healing from this is realizing that the way that we are kind of taught how to trust people is inappropriate to begin with as a society. So we're taught from a young age, that certain people are just automatically safe. Yeah. And that we should just trust them, take them at face value, and we should trust them because they're family, or because we've known them for 20 years, or because they have the same religion as us, or that they're just the same gender. Women got to stick with women, right? Or different types of social kind of conditioning. Oh, well, a mother always loves her child, so therefore all mothers are good people. Or do you see what I'm saying? Or all elderly people, or all people that have some sort of disability, that they're somehow safe, or that an attractive person is safe. Because we have this idea that we would see a problematic person coming and we would be wrong. Because
and some of that is like innate. It's like something we don't even realize. Like what made me stop you was the attractive people, because by nature, even babies will be more inclined to feel more comfortable with an attractive person than an attractive stranger, as opposed to an unattractive stranger, based on basic, symmetry of the face and things like that, mm-hmm. and so if you think about it from that perspective, it's ingrained in us. We have to literally outthink our primal urges on some level.
Yeah, this is a big deal. I mean, prosecuting attorneys really struggle with this when they have when they're presenting a case, it's sort of like, okay, well, just because this woman is 90 years old and looks like a nice little old grandma doesn't mean that she wasn't involved in human trafficking.
Right.
Or just because this guy is really good looking, Ted Bundy. Same with Scott Peterson and Chris Watts. Just because they're seen as attractive, don't let them off the hook. You really got to guard your thinking. So, and unfortunately with this, because this is the reality of life, is that we don't live in a safe world. We live in kind of a neutral world where there's good and bad. And that ability to develop a healthy level of discernment comes with experience, unfortunately, and getting burned a few times. However, people that haven't been through something like this, they often confuse this kind of waking up process that people go through as hypervigilance. Oh, well, you're just on guard because of the trauma. And so many things are kind of dismissed or chalked up to trauma, when in fact it's waking up to, oh, no, actually, if we want to look statistically, okay, let's say 5% of the population has a very problematic personality disorder, narcissism, antisocial personality, right? 5 or 6%. Well, that's 6 out of every 100 people.
Right.
So if you're in a classroom, 6 of those people have the potential to ruin your life. And for those of us that have gone through it and had major damage done, if we're thinking about things that way, then of course you're going to feel anxious, because if we're like, well, then I've got to be able to spot them so I can keep myself safe. Whereas other people are like, no, you got to love like you've never been hurt. The world is safe. It's all wonderful. You're just feeling this way because you were abused. And so you got to trust sometime. And so then we're getting torn between these kind of what we know to be true and what we're being told, and that we're being told that we're hypervigilant and that how we feel has no merit. And the solution to that is in the middle there of developing discernment and realizing also the other criteria that it takes time, I guess, to really kind of get to see a person's behavior clearly. There's nothing wrong with you if you don't trust someone you hardly know. That's appropriate. It's not a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that you're developing healthy boundaries. And the criteria that we're looking for those that are seeking validation, one of the pieces they struggle with is kind of being able to respond to that environment without having concrete proof that there is in fact a problem. And again, this is something that the vast majority of society will tell you, like, well, but you don't know for sure. Let's analyze this. I can't tell you the amount of damage I've had done to myself in therapy because we were going down the wrong rabbit hole of what the issue was, when it wasn't, I was sensing things were off about problematic people, but because I already had PTSD, it was chalked up to, well, let's look at this logically. Well, they're friendly, they're approachable, they're love bombing, they're showering you with attention and affection, they're telling you everything you want to hear. What's the problem? If you're not comfortable with that, then it's some sort of deep-seated issue within you. And the reality is that's not correct. If something feels off, especially if it doesn't feel off around other people that have proven themselves to be safe in the past, that you've known, you have a long-standing history that they're safe. Like, my go-to is my brother. He's my constant. So he's the person I feel consistently stable around, safe, secure. I don't question his intentions, anything like that. If I start feeling like, ooh, just kind of fluttery and uncertain, I think, you know what? I don't feel this way around everybody. It's just certain people.
Right.
And then it's time to kind of take some steps back. And plus, too, here's the thing. The more you really understand different, especially like manipulation and covert abuse, psychological and emotional abuse, the less external validation you'll need, because you understand. You're like, that's triangulation, that's projection, that's gaslighting.
Yes.
That's abusive. No wonder I feel off, because their behavior is not appropriate.
Yeah. I found that exactly that, going through figuring out what the heck I was dealing with and learning about the behaviors and being able to do exactly that, point them out to myself, it made the whole thing recovery possible for me, because it allowed me to get out of my emotional self and into my, I like to call it being a scientist, where I could look at, like, almost quantifiable, I don't think that's the right word here, but identifiable behaviors, where I could go, okay, this is gaslighting for sure. This is, projection for sure. And now I know I'm not crazy, and that was for me a lot of the reason I started writing about it in the first place, to clarify it for myself, and also to, like, gather up all the facts, and because at the time there was nobody else talking about it really, so, I mean, not like we do today. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure people were, but I just didn't find that many people. So, yeah, that's really interesting. I do think that's a big part of recovery, is taking that time to recognize and see what you're dealing with and understand it.
Yeah. And I have found time and again that once people get those fundamental steps, once they kind of get pointed in the right direction, because it's so easy to just, take a misstep, and the next thing you know, you're kind of off in the weeds. And getting those first few foundational pieces in place, it's just, their healing is just exponential. They just start getting it. And things that they were confused, it's really wild, you guys. Like, and it doesn't take, I mean, sometimes it just takes a few hours of, like, getting the right information and then getting it pointed in the right direction. Stuff that you might have waffled back and forth before, you see clearly, and you're like, oh, wow. Yeah. I can't even believe that I ever saw this any other way. You really get it.
Absolutely.
And real quick too, Belle of Amherst says, she says, oh, the anger trap. Thanks for that info, Dana. I will check it out. Always looking for a good read. I will say, I'm not sure if I'd call this book a good read. I'm not all the way through, and I have a ton of issues with it. But we're having our book club the last Thursday of this month, and 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So please join us. We will discuss it, because it's always interesting how you can have 100 people read a book and they will get 100 different things out of it.
Yes. Yes. And, Dana, just for those people who are not always here on your channel, let me just say, Dana does her book club right here on YouTube you said on Wednesday nights, right?
It's the last Thursday of every month, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but we do a live stream every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Keep it in mind.
3 hours.
Yeah. Right on. Okay. I have a question from Gigi Gets Fit, and she says,
okay.
Oh, wait, did we not finish answering that question? Oh, the good book question. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else to say about that before
no.
I roll on? Okay.
Well, actually, real quick, I will just, I know I'm biased, but I really feel like my books start here. You can find it on Amazon, across the internet, really. Dana Morningstar, Start Here. That literally is the book that I feel that it's a good starting point. It has all of the vocabulary in it, and has a lot of frequently asked questions. And it's just what a person needs to know to get up and running. It's kind of the Narcissistic Abuse 101.
I've heard a lot of positive things about it as well. And you have journaling with it, right? There's journal, or it is a journal or something.
Well, there's that book. And then I have other series of journals that are designed for kind of self-reflection and self-awareness that are kind of more down the road. But yeah.
Okay, cool. Somebody mentioned, I thought I heard somebody talk about it. That's why anyway. Okay. But I have heard a lot of positives about your book for sure. Gigi Gets Fit says, if you're not feeling well, will they purposely stress you out, like provoke asthma attacks, etc.? And I would just say, I've seen, I haven't personally experienced much with the asthma situation, but certainly when they kick you when you're down. You're already feeling bad. You're stressed out. You're sick, whatever it is. You have 500 things to do, and they could make your life so much easier by just, like, opening the door for you to walk out while you're carrying the 8 million groceries or whatever, and they'll trip you instead.
Yeah.
I've seen that with every narcissist I've ever run into. How about you, Dana?
Yes. And I've seen quite a few of them abandon their spouse when they've had some major issue, something going on, that they have a death of let's say the spouse has a death of a loved one or a child. Narcissist will up and leave. The target develops cancer. They up and leave, these kinds of things. So yeah, their behavior just not dealing with a mature.
And if they don't leave, they come back and torture them, or they, steal from them, or they, cheat on them in their face or whatever. I've seen that same thing. I've had clients who have been in literally what I would consider absolute hell, and they were stuck. They felt stuck because they had no money of their own. They were disabled. They had no way to get out, no way to work and make money, and the ultimate form of isolation.
Yeah.
It's terrible. Yeah.
It is.
It is. Oh, Marina says Start Here is such a great book. See?
Oh, well, thank you.
Right on. Oh, and Lorian Hibbs gave you 99 cents.
Oh, right on.
Right on.
Thank
right
you.
On. Let's see here.
Got a question here from Rebecca, who says, don't narcissists have a reactive attachment disorder caused by neglect or abuse of some kind? And I just wanted to say to that, they may or may not be officially diagnosed with some sort of attachment disorder. But one of my favorite theories regarding narcissism is that it is a defense, that the reason that person never gets out of that stage of emotional development, they kind of get stuck at this very immature stage where their ego just never forms past the ability to be self-oriented, is that I think there's something to be said for kind of these different defenses that we kind of that develop unconsciously. So it's very common for a person to go through some sort of traumatic event, and it could be anything. It could be abuse. It could be they were in a car accident and they have PTSD from that. It could have been that they were spoiled rotten and grew up with that sense of entitlement. And so they never had to develop a fully formed self because everything was kind of handed to them.
Yeah.
There's any number of reasons, but if a person at the end of the day, if they don't have that ability to effectively attach and bond to other people, the depth of the depth of the attachments they do form are very shallow, very, very shallow. And so this is why their behavior is so hurtful, because it's a lot like a toddler who one moment really wants a new toy, and then the next moment they're over it, and then the next moment they're, I love this, I need this, the world is going to end if they don't get a puppy, and then they get the puppy and then they're over it. It just that fleeting kind of behavior, there's no depth there because for a toddler, they haven't come to that emotional stage yet. So we expect it. But with adults, we're thrown off guard because we're like, how is this person so flighty and how do they just not care that their behavior hurts their children, or it hurts me, or like how is this adult, a toddler in an adult body? How does this happen?
I used to say to my ex-husband, who taught you that it was okay to treat people this way? I literally would say it because it was so shocking to me. Yeah. And that was after growing up the way that I did. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm with you on that, but you're right. And I think it's in a lot of cases, it's like you said, it's permissiveness. People are overly permissive. Okay. My phone thinks it needs to remind me 17,000 times of the same thing. Yeah. I think that's one of the ways that people don't recognize sometimes the overindulgence parent, the one who doesn't have any sort of limits or boundaries and lets the kid walk all over them. And maybe that's sometimes because they feel guilty or whatever, but I've seen that a lot.
Yeah, I have too.
Yeah. This is a question from JJFSX, who says to you, I told you that I was adopted. I found out that my father never knew I existed because I was stolen from my parents and sold on the black market, or my mother lied to my father. And I would say I am very fascinated by that. I actually did a video once about how, and it was at the request of a viewer, but they wanted to know, does adoption lead to narcissism in individuals? And no, it doesn't. But there have been studies on that because there's a lot of trauma with adoption, even in the good cases. Sorry, even in the good cases where people actually, like my husband had a great family. He grew up with a great family. He was adopted. And for those of you who don't know, he was abandoned at birth and left in a phone booth. I did a video about it on my channel.
Mm.
And I found his people a year ago, I guess. And it was like a big deal because there were no records. There was nothing. They never searched. Once he was adopted 20 days after he was born, they stopped the search. There was no paper trail of him except from that day forward, from the phone booth on. So we had to, dig. And we found them through DNA finally, but it was a long, hard 16-year run. So, yeah, but I do think that somebody who would do something that heinous, as to not say, not tell the person, or to just like my husband's mother literally almost threw him away.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty crappy. But
Yeah.
every rose has its thorn, or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to.
No, it's okay. Yeah, the JJ. Well, it sounds like there's one of two things that could have happened. Either and two very different things that could have happened. So one, you were literally stolen from your mother, from both of your parents, and sold on the black market, or your mother didn't let your father know that she was pregnant, or said that she lost the baby and then in fact put you up for adoption. And then if that was the case, then the adoption could have been completely legal. So if if you were stolen as a baby and, kind of human trafficking kind of a thing, basically, then yeah, I believe the people that are involved, and that's incredibly sociopathic behavior. That's kind of the worst of the worst. But I think also there's quite a few people, there's quite a few women out there that for a wide variety of reasons don't want their former partner, don't want other people to know that they were pregnant for whatever reason. Guilt, shame, abuse, society, culture, religion. So it's just hard to say.
But JJ, I don't know if you said, do you think the people who, is this what you were responding to?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, anything, I don't know. I know this. I don't know how old JJ is. I know my husband was born in 1972. And back then, things, yes, there's a record of the adoption, but it was also illegal to adopt a baby who had been found and didn't have parents before the age of a year old. They had to wait a year in that state. And yet somehow, like, this police officer signed as his parent, like as his guardian. That's how they got around it or something. And there are a lot of like shady deals that happened back then. I don't believe that, he had amazing parents. I didn't get to meet his father, but his mother was amazing. And his father died when he was 12. But I'm just saying, they obviously weren't the one. They didn't take him, but they certainly grabbed him up as soon as they had the chance, to get him. And in hindsight, now that I know the story as much as I can know about his biological mother, she's passed away and did so before we found the family. But from what the sisters have pieced together, because she told no one in their family, which is another story, but what they've pieced together is basically at the time he would have been born, she was living with her very toxic, very controlling mother at 28 years old. And she had 3 other children, and one of them she'd already given up for adoption, and the other one, 3 of them were born in a row. So there was like, my husband was actually the youngest, which I thought was odd. But my point is that, do I think that she was, I think that in his case, the people who found him obviously weren't related to the people who left him. And the person in that case who was the narcissist probably was the controlling grandmother, if you were to pick one of the bunch. But I still struggle with the fact that the woman took it to her grave and never told anyone ever about this whole person that she just deleted from their lives, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but um,
Yeah.
I guess you'd have to get to know the story first, JJ. That's my point. Find out the story, find out what, and is it really relevant anyway? I mean, at this point, I'm
Yeah, it's a challenge. Like what you're saying, Angie, there's some children that have been put up for adoption do struggle with that. And um,
well, there's the core wound too,
yeah, there definitely can be. And even if they are adopted into wonderful, loving families, it's not unusual for a child to internalize that because they're young. They're looking at it through the eyes of a child of kind of what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
Why didn't you want me? Especially if there were other siblings that stayed.
Right.
And
the way they get treated, right, as adopted children.
Yeah.
But
oftentimes at school, kids are mean. Mm-hmm. And,
the whole thing. It's all oh, wait. What? That was a good... Angela Falsetta wanted to know about the question I asked my ex-husband, who told you that it was okay to behave that way. That was always taken as a hypothetical, Angela. It was never taken as an actual question. I mean, it should have been, because I did really want to know the answer, but it was never answered. It was always ignored. So, yeah. Anyway, sorry, I don't mean to be so scattery today.
Yeah, no, you're fine. You're fine. Here's a comment. This is from earlier in the chat from Nails. We were talking about kind of extreme personality disorders. And I was saying 5% or so of the population. And Nails is saying, well, I think 5% is a very low estimate. And I agree. I also wanted to add to that it's important for us to not realize that doesn't mean, let's just say that is accurate. Okay. 5% of the population just, run from them. That doesn't mean that the other 95% of the population is your kind of people and has absolutely stellar, appropriate, mature, team-oriented, assertive communication kind of behavior.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And I think one of the things I like to point out a lot of times, because I think when it comes to official like narcissistic personality disorder diagnosis, I think it's like 0.6 of the population. But those are the people who have been diagnosed. That, those aren't the people who, like, those are the criminals and the ones who were dragged into therapy for some reason outside of the real reason, most of the time. So I always like to remind people.
And it's difficult. I think a lot of people too, they have this idea that kind of diagnosing emotional health disorders is a lot like diagnosing physical health disorders, and it's not. So physical health, you do blood work or you have some symptoms, and you can pretty accurately pinpoint, okay, this plus this plus this equals this. And if the doctor's off, then there's maybe a handful of other things that it can be, but it can be ruled out pretty quickly. Emotional health, there's all kinds of stuff. And we are really kind of at the cusp of even beginning to understand all of the different challenges of, unprocessed trauma and attachment disorders and all of this. This is really kind of a new understanding of emotional health that's just been really, I would say, in the past 40 or so years.
Yeah.
So this is all very new.
That's right. Hey, I'm really sorry to do this, but I want to just go off topic for a second. Mo Cowboy and JJ and Jen, we all have so many things to talk about. Because, Mo Cowboy said he liked the video where I talked about my husband's situation and gave him the courage to have his brother obtain DNA samples to see which of them are full siblings and maybe find his bio father. Jen also was apparently stolen and never given back to her bio parents. And of course, JJ's story. And JJ adds that fake adoption agencies bribe crooked hospitals and nurses to tell them that the baby was stillborn, then they sell them. This still happens today. And I believe that. I've actually heard I've done a ton of research into this, and I'm very passionate about it. This is one of my little side things I do because of my husband's situation. So I just want to say to the three of you, please, let's all connect on this outside of the stream. I don't want to take up any more of the stream, but I would love to talk with you guys about that. And I would be really excited to try to help you find your people and work on all that. I love that stuff. So let's talk about all that. Okay,
Yeah,
moving on.
it's interesting. And I think that kind of stuff especially happens in kind of more developing countries.
But even here, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I have
But you're right. Yeah.
Seen some wild stuff in my day. There was a gal, this was a handful of years ago, who, I'm debating if I want to say that. I don't want to like cause panic in people, had gone into a group home. Okay. And it turns out that group home was involved in human trafficking.
Oh.
And so here she was thinking that she was going to be safe, and no. And then years went by. She had, this horrific story, finally escaped it. And it just, so yeah, this stuff is very real. And it's hard for normal, decent people to hear stories like that and think that this is possible, because it sounds delusional,
right.
especially based on what we know about, oh, well, these people are instantly on your side, like they can be trusted. It's the same thing with, that's why priests molesting children went on for so long, as people just could not fathom, like, how could this possibly be? These are men of God. They're celibate. They're not
right
being sexual at all, but they're for sure not doing that with children. They would never do that.
Yeah. It's yeah, it's the horrible things that, Georgia 10 sold over 5,000 babies. That's right. I know all these stories. I have obsessively researched this, y'all. Obsessed, because I thought, when you can't find a paper trail, you have to think of all the things. All I knew was where he was found and his race and eye color. That was it. And various health conditions, that was very hard. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, JJ found a cousin. Amazing. Okay. Anyway, sorry, Dana. I'm really sorry. I just feel
I'm fine. You're totally fine.
Like, I sometimes think I should do a channel about that, because I am almost equally, passionate about that that topic. Anyway. Okay.
Every time, Angie, every single time I watch these true crime videos on YouTube, I think about you, and I'm like, I wish I was closer, because girl, I would be coming over with some popcorn and some margaritas, and we could just have our own channel.
We need to do that. Like, you live in Michigan?
I don't live terribly far from you. I really could make a trip out, and we could just binge watch.
We could meet in the middle, somewhere, right?
A girls' weekend.
Yeah.
Margaritas and true crime and just
cameras and reacts and
seriously. Yeah. Because I feel like there's so much that's not being said about these true crimes. It's more of a kind of a perspective that I feel like that we can bring.
Yes.
Of kind of these early warning signs, because every single true crime I see, they're like, and nobody saw it coming. And for all of us that have been through it, we're like, what? No, right. Yeah, we had this person's number from like the get, because we've lived it.
Right.
And it's all of that stuff that leads up to it, I think, is helpful to show.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, JJ. It is what it is. No identity in reality made me the codependent people pleaser I am. And, you could have gone the other way. But you're right. I have a whole other story of my own, but when I got my DNA tested because I wanted to know who I truly was. I was told lies about it growing up. I'll just leave it at that for now. And I needed to know that. I needed to know all the things about who the people were that came way before me. It really made me feel more connected, I think. And I can imagine what JJ's going through. He's saying he's got pictures of his parent. I don't know if JJ's male or female.
Yeah,
JJ,
I don't either. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. JJ has pictures of JJ's parents, really having a hard time with this on top of, a lot of other things. But all of those things ring true, I think, for people who in situations like that, and anyone. But even in my situation, like I felt disconnected from everyone for different reasons, similar reasons, but I don't want to talk about all that right now. Anyway, getting back to our original topic, Dwayne Outdoors says, I think I have have a hard time understanding that a codependent empath and a narcissist are basically brought up in the same trauma. And that is actually, pretty true. I see that a
Mhm.
lot. Yeah. I mean, except on the flip side of that, of course, being the people pleaser, being the overindulged child, you know, would be kind of outside of that. But a large percentage, I certainly do agree, could be brothers and sisters. And you do see that. You see kids raised by toxic parents, one becomes a codependent, one becomes a narcissist. You see that pretty frequently. And it's not always who you think it'll be. Like it's not always the golden child or who's the narcissist and the scapegoat who's you know what I mean? Not always. I mean, although
That's a very valid point that I don't know if anybody's ever brought up before. You should make a video on that because you're absolutely right. Like we tend to want to compartmentalize people and think, well, if they're this way, then they will end up this way. And sometimes that does not happen at all. Sometimes the scapegoat ends up, being an abuser, or sometimes they end up being this champion of, they have they go on and live happy, healthy, well-adjusted lives, or they become, more people pleasing, and because they understand what it's like to be bullied.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Something else. Yep. All right. Let's see here. We are getting pretty close to our end. Do you want to do like another question each, or how do you want to?
Sure. I have a question if you don't.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. I'll do mine next.
Okay. I wonder if you picked the same question. Okay. This is from Embla, who says, the bad feelings that we have experienced get stuck in the body. With me, I feel it's like a feeling of suction or void at the heart or neck area. Does anyone else experience this? And to that, I would say you are very spot on and accurate. So there's a book out there, if you're interested, called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's written by a doctor, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. It's one of the foundational books on understanding trauma and the different effects that trauma has. And so what he was discovering, I want to say back in like the 70s or 80s, was that that the body does remember. And that when we go through trauma, because there's all these different chemicals that are released, there's a lot of kind of adrenaline and cortisol and these different stress-related chemicals. If those aren't kind of discharged from the body, then they stay there. And so then this is kind of one of the theories behind PTSD. So then we kind of get locked in. So instead of having flight or fight be a defense mechanism that's engaged only when we need to get out of danger, we stay locked in that. And then we end up living our lives like that. And then that's why there's all of this adrenal fatigue. We're exhausted. We're feeling hypervigilant all of the time because there's this cellular component to trauma. But one of the, there's a couple different therapies that have stemmed from that many people, it's kind of I would say the gold standard in therapy treatment now for trauma is EMDR, which is eye movement. What is it?
Desensitization. Oh, wait.
Yeah. Desensitization.
Right.
Something or other. Release, or I'm drawing a blank on it.
Normally I know this. Go ahead.
I know. I had to Google. I know. Me too. But that therapy involves processing the trauma and utilizing your body to help you process it. There's also yoga, trauma yoga. That's for people that have been through abuse, helping them to get into, because there's this disassociation that also occurs with abuse. And so then we feel very fragmented. And to kind of get all of those pieces back together, some of the methods like the dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, even though it's normally used for borderline personality disorder, like the mindfulness components of it, the kind of watching our emotions as they surface, learning to process them, that's stuff that I think anybody can benefit from. But for those of us that have been through trauma, it can be especially helpful. Even going for a run, going to the gym and getting that energy out is powerful.
And I just want to add that it's almost I don't know. It's an interesting coincidence or not that the a lot of the law of attraction teachings, and I'm sorry to throw this in here, but part of the reason that I think I was able to heal was because a lot of the law of attraction teachings, the mindfulness stuff, and paying attention to your thoughts, focusing on what you want, not what you don't want, all that stuff. I started with that stuff because I was like, well, I want my life sucks. I want my life to be better before I even knew anything about,
Mm-hmm.
anything else. And I think it was really those teachings that helped me to grow out of being a codependent person.
Hmm.
Which is bizarre, but again, there wasn't when I was going through my deepest parts of my abuse, there was, well, the first, however many years, there was no internet because I'm old. And after that, and after that, there was no, there was not a lot of information out there. You know what I'm saying? Like as an adult, the information was not, I found I think I found Sam Vaknin's original websites. It was like 2005, 2003, something like
Mm-hmm.
that, 2005. And I found like some old Sam Vaknin websites that sort of started to wake my eyes up to it. And then I literally went to the library and started researching because there just wasn't as much out there. You know what I mean? And so there is I guess my point is that, and I'm not preaching any sort of like religion or spirituality at all here, but the simple exercises that I was doing, like after reading The Secret or whatever, or what is it? Abraham Hicks, reading some of their stuff. It was after that, it's all about really focusing on your thoughts and having control over your thoughts and recognizing that you can have control and that you can also affect your future or your experience by changing your perception. And so like all of those things are simple, what I thought were spiritual teachings at the time, or some kind of teaching. And as I started to learn about CBT and all this other stuff, I recognized that it's interesting how similar those things are if you think about
Mm-hmm.
it. You know what I mean? Anyway, the
Yeah.
mindfulness part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. What's interesting too with a lot of kind of what they're finding with trauma based, like PTSD based therapy, is that there's uh, kind of very little value in going back and having a survivor explain, tell me everything that happened to you. Like let's revisit this whole experience again. And that's oftentimes more traumatizing than it can be helpful, kind of for this reason, because it's more of this bodily component that it's
Right.
kind of got to disengage this fight or flight response first before getting them grounded in reality, in the present moment, because trauma, when it happens, it's like this bomb goes off in your life and you get stuck in the past and there is no present and there is no future.
Right.
You're stuck in that moment. Like in the book, The Body Keeps the Score, he talks about with Vietnam veterans.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they just stop and they're there. It's so tragic and fascinating at the same time about, okay, then what does this mean for us that are trying to help people process trauma and move forward?
Right. But I think, and that's a good point that you made, because one thing I think I did wrong back then that I think I understand a little better now. One thing that my initial teaching or what I originally learned was you don't need to focus on the problem, just like you need to focus on the solution. And I'm totally with that. However, I now understand that for people who go through the trauma like I personally went through, a lot of people do want to tell the story one time.
Yes.
They do need to be heard because nobody validates them. And so I also understand the value in letting the emotions happen before you move into that place of peace. Because what will happen if you don't, and what happened to me because I didn't, was that I crashed. Because I was like, oh, everything is awesome. My life is so much better. And it was. And then I crashed because I had feelings I hadn't resolved and worked through, and things were triggery. And, so I do think it's important to say you must feel the feelings. You must heal yourself and if you need to talk about it and tell the story, please tell the story.
Yes, absolutely. And you're describing kind of this tightrope that is our challenge, right? Of working with people that are in trauma of, okay, like holding that space for them and saying, okay, you know what, if you need to talk about this, getting that poison out of your belly, like if you just need to keep vomiting up and rehashing everything that happened, then yes, because you have been so invalidated and misunderstood and silenced, that it is important for you to be heard and be validated. And that's the other challenge too, for
I
those
love
of us that have gone through this, is because the whole time, even though we were a willing participant in this relationship, we didn't know what was going on. And so as these pieces of the puzzle start coming into focus and you realize, oh my gosh, this was abuse, we start looking back on it and you start seeing it in a different way. And the more pieces that come into play, it's like the whole puzzle shifts again and you see it differently. And that's one of the reasons people keep talking and talking and talking about it, because they just keep having this clarity that has been missing for so long, and things are starting to finally make sense. But yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Okay. One question I just want to really quick hit, and then I know
Sure.
probably
Yeah.
should already go, but I just want to throw it out here. Miss Markle, I love that name, says, did Angie ever think to ask who taught her to put up with someone who treats people that way?
Mm.
Because that's a valid point. And no, man, but I did eventually get that. Eventually I realized, what am I doing? Why I don't have to put up with this. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, certainly that's a valid question and one I should have asked myself a lot sooner. But unfortunately, or otherwise, it took my fear for my child that, before I didn't value myself enough back then to walk away. It took me being afraid for my child for me to walk away. And that's wrong, but that's how it was. So, I was young. That's all I can tell you. And I had no self-esteem at all. So, but I figured it out. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, you know what, even if you'd been older, that her question is flipping fantastic. And it's such a big shift in healing for so many of us, because for so long, we're so focused on what is wrong with them. I just need to get through to them that they're abusive or that they've got all these kinds of problematic behavior. And then there's a point in our healing where down the road, this often takes us quite a while to get to, where we're like, well, wait a minute, what's going on? Why do I have this in my life? And then that's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down.
It's hard to go down that one because you don't want to. Yeah. And I almost worry about taking people down that path too early, because I think, a lot of times people they need to know that there's nothing wrong with them, and there is nothing wrong with them, but the way that they perceive themselves and the world around them is causing them to allow people to walk on them. And that, you could say it's right or wrong, but it, obviously isn't healthy either way. So yeah, I like that question too.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I try to frame it in the context of our society is dysfunctional, because so oftentimes people try to make connections. Well, it might have been your mother or your father. And for some people, this can cause years where they're kind of gazing into their navel, trying to figure out, well, what could have possibly caused this, especially if they didn't grow up in abuse. Yeah. Or even if they had a Norman Rockwell childhood, then they're totally at a loss. And it's just, society is dysfunctional. No one gets to adulthood with the healthy messages they need to have in order to be self-protective. And just real quick to Pia Melody, I think just absolutely, I love the distinction that she makes, because kind of, I think the prevailing mindset with the mental health community in general is this understanding of childhood of kind of a nourishing, is a loving home, right? A functional home. That's not going to inoculate a person from getting tangled up with an abuser. It might help to role model some healthier behaviors, but it's not the only thing. It's not a nourishing home. It's a nurturing home. And a nurturing home is one that gives a child kind of both roots and wings, and prepares them for a world that is neutral. And warns them of the different dangers and empowers them, like, to stand on their own 2 feet. Here's how you do laundry. Here's how you cook. Here's how you pay your bills. Here's how you balance your checkbook. Yeah. Here's how to tell safe people from unsafe people. All of this stuff. But
also, I think instilling a sense of self-value that, self-value and empathy, both on, what I mean? A balance of that as well, because we could go into all that all day, but I don't have time, and neither do you. So
I know. That's a whole nother live stream.
Whole other stream. Yeah. Right on. Good stream, Dana. This was good.
This was good. And we'll have to think about planning a girls trip for
I'm into it.
true
Seriously.
crime and
True crime weekend.
Yes. I would be
Imagine the vlog content we could come up with. It could be really good.
Yes.
We could do a special stream. Okay, moving on.
Okay, guys. Well, guys, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for all of your fantastic questions. As always, Angie and I do this live stream every Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We alternate channels. So next week, we're going to be over at Angie's channel, Angie Atkinson, on YouTube and across the internet. So we hope you can make it. So,
see you there.
Angie,
subscribe to both of us.
Yes.
We'll see you there.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Take care, guys. For those on my channel, I'll see you tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
All right.